it's about who I am surrounding myself with in terms of consciousness and like the information I'm exposing myself to, but also like being very aware of my thoughts. So before it was like I was saying negative, I was playing a negative tape and I was believing it. And so that was a poison that was limiting me from evolving to a place that I am now, and I'd like to continue to go.
That was Inez Hunter, aka Mujer Muralista, a teacher, muralist, and advocate for the rights of all people. We're talking about colonization and decolonizing identity today. I'm your host, Martin John, and you're listening to the Recover Yourself podcast, where we address topics you'll face while on a journey to recovering yourself. This podcast is all about expanding the definition and scope of how we see addiction and recovery, so everyone has an opportunity to recover themselves. So no matter where you are on this journey, there is a place for you here. Since conceptualizing this topic, it has become increasingly clear that addiction and colonization are very tied together. I don't know anything that colonization hasn't touched, and I'm willing to bet that your addictions, the things you use to escape, and the things you're escaping from have everything to do with colonization. Our education system, it's fairly singular and only values a very select few skill sets. And our economic system, similar to our education system, is fairly singular, where only a very few set of skill sets are valued, and how we value them is very limited. Our policing, political, and healthcare system are all built to support those narrow viewpoints. Family, community, and neighbors all too often have the same ideas of supporting those narrow viewpoints. What this means is that the individual, the person who has a different set of values just doesn't fit in. When we are born, the moments that we are not accepted get experienced as trauma. When we experience trauma, we don't change the way we look at that thing which caused us the trauma, especially as children, but we change the way we see ourselves. And I would argue that most people don't fit into this small-minded way we've laid out our society. And those who don't fit in are either stuffed into prisons, left to wither away feeling dismissed like they're crazy, or left to eke out an existence simply supporting those that do fit in. Now, Mujer Muralista also addresses intergenerational trauma and her having to hold space for healing within her family so as not to pass on those traumas to a family and community she is intentionally building. Mujer Muralista, thank you so much for being with me. I'm really excited to chat with you about decolonizing identity.
Let's do it. I'm happy to be here.
Yes. You have a lot of passion around decolonizing, and I want to ask you can you frame what colonization looks like?
Yeah, colonialism. Oh, well, I Googled this earlier, and it said something about taking over politically a space and a people with language and just obtaining the most political power. But to me, that wasn't good enough. So I feel like colonialism is a poison, and folks need to detox from that poison. But that's my bias. That's my opinion. Mm-hmm. The fact that we're speaking English right now, or for me, Spanish or English, any of the mm-hmm. European languages, the way I view myself, the categorization of status, class, sexuality, the laws that I have as a human being in this body, the laws my husband has as a Black man in his body, my children, it affects all of us. And it's a poison. So because it's a poison I've been drinking my whole life, I just awakened to detoxing that in my later teenage years and really questioning what it was I was absorbing all this time as truth, as fact. And it's been a interesting journey.
My understanding of what you're saying, the idea that it's poison, it's even poisoned people like myself, of just like the way I see myself has been dictated by others. And so speaking with, I don't have anywhere to go with that, but you have community and you have reference to a different self because of your heritage.
Yes, and I had to fight for it. Like, it's not just something I inherited. I didn't know I was Native until later in life because I kept pushing and asking questions and doing research and reflecting and essentially decolonizing. And I discovered, yeah, there's a lot more to me than Latina and Jewish. And I didn't even know what the Jewish was. And that was confusing. So,
Right. So, like, how did you detox from the you that was created by others?
ugh, my art definitely saved me. Some mentors I had along the way saved me. Um, Showed me that there was another way besides gang affiliation, besides this certain identity I was clinging to as my reality and my true self. Asking questions and discovering more of my father's history, not just as a person from Chile who went into the Navy, who became a political prisoner, who was exiled to the United States, but before that, and just what he inherited, and just deconstructing and unpacking all of the shame that he had as a then, well, it's complex, but so I just grew up with multiple identities, just holding space for his trauma and his history and the history of Chile, but also deeper, like indigenous history. And like, what does that look like? The history of my people, Mapuche Nation.
Right.
Yeah.
And what does that look like to you today as being someone who associates with that and associates like your life? And that's a meaningful aspect of who you are and how you move forward, even if like there's no strict identification because you didn't grow up in it, but you're learning. And so now it's like, it's an aspect of your life, even if it's not something that is tangible.
Oh, good question. You know, I look to my children and my students, especially those who are Black or African American or of African descent. The African diaspora, Black identity, African American, African identity, descendant from Africa is vast. And talking to my students about this, and my husband and my children, of course, but as they grow up, I just mean that there are so many embedded what am I trying to say? Negative side effects of colonialism, colorism, and all of these caste categorizations throughout Latin America and the United States or anywhere in the world has their caste system. And it's really detrimental and harmful to the individual, let alone society, and how we view ourselves and how others view us. So just seeing that beautiful, powerful, dynamic diaspora and all the struggles they go through, and then in parallel, in conjunction, the indigenous identity, First Nations identity, Native Indigenous identity throughout the Americas and Pacific Island also, and Oceania. But yes, all of these indigenous nations and the caste systems that have been put onto us as well. And I must be completely honest and transparent about my privilege in the context of colonialism, because yes, I am racially white, I am racially Native, but nobody can see the Native. And I am ethnically Jewish, I am ethnically Mapuche. But even that it just goes deep. There's so much we don't see below the surface. But back to my point about the two diasporas,
Yeah.
there's a really, excuse my French, really fucked up categorizing and comparison. Like if you have a drop of Black blood, you Black, but you need a whole lot of Native blood to prove you're indigenous, to prove. Yet no other people, that white people don't need to do this ever. Like what kind of white are you? How white are you? What percentage of white are you? I don't know if we can count you as white because of A, B, and C. So that has been the bane of my existence, and I fight it. I challenge it every day within myself, checking my own crap, within my family, within my community, my students. Like these conversations can happen with the beautiful tool of art as a reference, because sometimes we don't have the language to navigate these discussions, and it's difficult to get into this without getting angry, and that's totally legitimate, like valid for someone to get angry. And I think of how I was as a young person, and how angry I was. And if I'm honest, angry for like over 10 years, trying to figure this out, trying to be at peace with the cards I was dealt, but also play them to the best of my ability and use my privilege for good.
Right. Wow. Well, that's a huge thorn in my side as well. This idea that we have to prove bloodlines and other things like that within, especially down to tribe. And
blood quantum politics,
yep.
all that nonsense.
Yeah. And that's really just so we don't just so we, I mean, I'm white, I'm American, like we don't have to respect the rights of people. And I get that, and it's blatant and it's obvious and it is dirty, and this is part of colonization.
Yeah, it is. But
and we're in a world of that.
We are, and one can become a chameleon. One can become savvy in speaking the language or playing the game, but then bending the rules. Like Picasso said, learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist. So it's kind of like in that vein. And the arts is a way to do that, to kind of make that voice heard very loud and clear and get it out to a lot of people, help people navigate their own healing journeys or whatever, open dialogues and discussions so that change can occur.
So much of this kind of bears a lot of trauma, and I know you had mentioned, we had talked that you had dealt with a lot of trauma in your life, and having to kind of deal with the generational trauma of your parents and other things that were going on there. Can you speak about that? And is there a connection to that and your strength that led you to embracing your Mapuche past or your identity, or you it's like in recovering yourself, as one would say?
Yeah, recovering yourself. I like that. Nice plug.
Yeah, look.
Yeah. Let's see. It's very interesting how my parents came to be together. Like the two most opposite cultures I can imagine, indigenous and like Jewish, are together and happy and have kids. Yeah. Oh my gosh. But my father was born in Temuco, went to Santiago, went into the Navy, studied gun mechanics, and then the coup happened. And he became a political prisoner. He was captured and tortured. He was put into a concentration camp. He was in solitary confinement for, I believe, 6 months. He was in prison for 5 years and then exiled. And he came here. He met my mom, an agnostic Ashkenazi Jew from Chicago, living in Oakland. And they just connected, and very quickly they were married after a few months. And here I am, born in 1981. So it was like a really quick, it might have been a little over a year. I was born after he was released from prison. And the family dynamics, what one inherits from their family, can be a catalyst for change or for healing. And in my case, it was both. I certainly learned at a young age to hold space for my family, to navigate their traumas, my father and mother alike. And as a child, not having, as a child kind of raising your parents in a sense, like it can be a burden.
Well, that should never happen, but yes, it's like,
I know, but I'm just,
like, yes, that is straight up burden. Like that's not like, yeah.
Sure. But there are worse things. And I do find that helps today, and it makes me really happy to hold space for people.
Yeah,
I'm as an educator,
right?
But no, I didn't know I was Native till later. I was kind of figuring that out on my own. There was something else going on besides Latina, and I had to figure that out. It was just driving me crazy.
And what separated those things, like Native and Latina, for you? How did that kind of show itself?
Yeah, I don't know if it was super conscious at first, but it started to kind of mess with me on the subconscious level. And I mean, that's a testament to where I grew up as well. East Oakland in the 80s was very diverse. And I don't mean diverse like Chicago, where everybody's segregated from block to block. I mean actual diversity where we were mixing, within the same block. And so being a second generation in this country, growing up speaking Spanish in the home, already living insulated in a mixed ethnic environment, language, culture, custom, class, and then around other people who are different than me in all of those categories, certainly was part of my education that I felt that I owe a lot to. People put a lot of energy into like formal education, but I was always more interested in connecting with people and really getting to understand them and like what makes you tick. And I want to learn more about that because I don't know about it versus, I get what you said in those few sentences. Now I understand you. No, like just constantly open to learning. And I always kept my childlike wonder, awe in that regard. And that served me well. But Oakland raised me and really helped me be able to hold space with a lot of people who are different and be able to kind of navigate. And exposure is everything in terms of representation. And I was looking around and I couldn't really see myself anywhere. And so I was looking, I eventually would gravitate towards other friends who were mixed or had a unique background or second generation in this country too. Children of immigrants, I connect with a lot. And just kind of these unspoken things that you share, kind of being between two worlds or multiple worlds and navigating this society in the United States with the privileges here, maybe not. I think that all influenced me.
Yeah. You were interested in multiple things, and then you're telling a story in which kind of like shows that you're floating. You don't have anywhere to ground yourself. Right? Because everything is in the air. And then like, I mean, I can only imagine that Mapuche is like, when you find that out, you're like, oh, here's something I can kind of sink my teeth into and ground myself with. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what it seems.
It just took a while to get there. Yeah. But it's like a seed planted, and then you don't really know what it's turning into. And then all of a sudden it sprouts and you're like, okay, I'm going to keep giving this attention. I'm going to keep watering it and giving it sunshine and love. And eventually it will get stronger. But it was insecure at first. I didn't know because I was still adhering to the context of a colonial language. Like, oh, you can't be native or because of the way you look, and you didn't grow up speaking your own language, so you're not native, or you didn't grow up on the reservation, or you're mixed. So all of this crap, but I believed it at the time because how I didn't have anyone else to tell me any different. I was doing it by myself until I wasn't. That was when everything changed for me. The catalyst really was becoming more exposed to Lakota ceremony, sweat lodge culture, tribe, and Lakota people, Lakota nation and their ceremonies, and they saved my life. So it was like art and then being exposed to a nation that has their culture and their ceremony, and then having the gift really to be exposed to that, learn more about that, and then eventually get adopted in to that, which in indigenous culture is called Honka relative. So I've been adopted there, and I got that was the beginning of my education there. And learning more about that through people who have it in a good way, just I was able to learn about my own culture simultaneously. So like kind of leaning on somebody else. It's kind of like I grew up in East Oakland around a lot of Mexicans. So I'm through osmosis, I really resonate and understand a lot of things culturally as a Latina then, being around a lot of Mexicans. So it's similar. So I leaned then on Lakota Nation, and it got more closer to my own. And I was able to study more and research and Google it, like all of that. Even before Google, it was libraries and asking questions, not being afraid to ask my father questions. Even if I was met with internalized and institutionalized racism and shame, which happened a lot. But still just having the patience, and this took years, because I was like when I was 21, and I will be 40 next year. So now I'm very strong in my identity because I worked really hard. And thank you, Lakota Nation, in those beautiful ways, and my brother. But that now I have my own family. I must lead by example. And it's just kind of clicked in. It was very organic. But I just felt a real solidifying of my identities and embracing and a unification of both. Like I never deny, like, yes, I'm Mapuche, I'm also Ashkenazi, Sephardic, Ashkenazi. Right. So it's both. Like, I cannot take one away, and one shouldn't invalidate the other, because that's colonialism. Like, yes, I recognize and acknowledge my privilege as a white woman. That's why I drive everywhere, because I have the complexion for the protection. So I do that. I play these games, whatever. If it keeps us safe, cool. I'm using my privilege for good. Mm-hmm. So I that's my form of protest, raising very strong children who are aware, self-aware, who are cognitive thinkers, who aren't just going to regurgitate what they're told. They're going to actively be learning, trying to teach my students that. I do this in my art. I'm highlighting people who are usually invisible in society because of whatever reason. It's like giving them a very loud voice. And that's why I'm a muralist. Make that image as big as possible, because that's all about that grassroots radical art. Big public mural for all to see and learn from, and let's have dialogues around that. Like, what does that represent? Why is it like that? What's your experience like? Like, not devaluing people's experience, because we are the experts of ourselves. Like, I don't need a school to tell me that. I don't need a school to tell me who I am. I don't need a degree on the wall to tell me I'm smart. That's stupid. That's a piece of paper. I paid for a piece of paper to allow certain doors to open. Cool. Yes, I'm going to keep getting those little receipts, those papers, so I can reach more people. But I don't need that. That doesn't feed my spirit. I know who I am. I worked really hard to get her. I don't need a paper to tell me.
Stigma is the word that that I want to talk a little bit about here, because stigma is exactly is like a perfect word for like what is happening. Like, one, you held a lot of stigma about being mixed. You held a lot of stigma, and that kept you from learning more or from it for a time, like not a long time, but it kept you kind of like beating yourself up a little bit and doing that shit that, like, you know, and something that frustrates me is everyone wants to be like, I want to eradicate stigma. And I'm like, well, stigma comes from us because we believe we're being, you know, like we believed something that is not true, but right. We believe it to be true. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about stigma, maybe like the stigma that your father carried, maybe the stigma that you carried in terms of trying to kind of like, okay, like I'm in a, like, do I feel fake because I'm going to Lakota Nation events and I'm Jewish? You know, like how did that all wrap up? Because I want to be able to wrap this up with alcoholics and stuff, because we carry so much of that just bullshit.
Oh yeah, and all of us do. We all got something. Everybody has something. I was a survivor of abuse as a child, and rape and trauma and a lot of just abuse growing up. I was raped by 2 men when I was 18. I was raped again at 25 and 27. So that's a lot of rape and a lot of fuckery to mess with a person's sense of self. And stigma and trauma I feel are closely intertwined. They kind of keep each other protected. And they make it challenging to heal and look at a lot of things, because there is, at least in my experience, just a lot of shame around, like, I could have done something different to avoid it, or placing a lot of blame on myself, and like that, of course I deserved that, or whatever reason. But it just wasn't, but it just wasn't helpful in getting to the root and the heart of like who I am. Like, that was something that happened to me. That's not who I am. And it shouldn't define who I am. But I had it was many years of struggle and strife like I said, the beautiful ceremonies of the Lakota Nation, like Sweat Lodge, that's a beautiful place to heal. A sacred ceremony or somewhere where you feel safe with someone you trust to help you through things that are not easy. And it's not going to be like that. It takes time. So it's just like a constant commitment to self to go back and get her or him or them, go back and get that kid and heal them, heal that connection to make that a really strong one. And then all of a sudden you have an integrity. You know who you are because you're not running from your shadows. It's just, this is me. I have some things that added to the salsa that influenced who I am. But I know who I am. I know who I am inside. I know who I am in the context of colonialism, but I also know what could be. I know what that could look like. As an artist, you might understand this, just having that visualization, that's a gift, like being able to trust that whatever you are visualizing, you can come through and create a work of art from nothing. So that nothing came from something. That something was your integrity because you went and got it. So right. That the more you get in touch with yourself, I have found it's very empowering. And I'm not trying to diminish the process at all. It took a long time. I just don't like staying there super, super long. Right. I like to focus on a momentum and empowerment. I think it's very important to honor and hold space for the grief, though.
Yeah, because of course.
It's both. I'm not trying to be one of those people who are like, well, I don't see color. No, I see color. I'm just unpacking a lot of things. I'm healing all this colonialism, and I'm moving forward in my beliefs and trying to make this world better so that those who are Black and brown aren't suffering. Like, hello. Like, no, of course I see how, of course. I don't want to treat people as invisible.
Right.
I know what it is to be invisible too. It doesn't feel good. It's very demoralizing, dehumanizing.
There's a lot involved when we start talking about stigma with hanging out in a place we don't want to be. Mm-hmm. Hanging out in this area, and that's what I mean. You're addressing this idea of, all right, so we feel bad about something. Contributing to continuing to feel bad about that is unhealthy. So, I don't feel like what you're saying is reducing the importance of that grief, because that grief is what brought us to a place to heal.
Yeah. And I hear this a lot too in communities, like just ignorant comments around like, well, why doesn't that person just move out of that area if it's so horrible? And what I hear you saying, and I agree, I think it's not just about the place, it's about who I am surrounding myself with in terms of consciousness and like the information I'm exposing myself to, but also like being very aware of my thoughts. So before it was like I was playing a negative tape and I was believing it. And so that was a poison that was limiting me from evolving to a place that I am now, and I'd like to continue to go. But it was like unpacking that stigma first. And I still get it from time to time. I mean, I'm not out of the woods. I am living in this body in 2020. We still got colonialism, y'all. Racism exists. Man. It's here. So I'm in it, and it's going to be an everyday choice to be like, okay, let's get it. Time to get back to work. Yep. That's a choice every day. Get back to work. I'm going to actively and consciously make myself uncomfortable so I can be anti-racist, anti-misogynist, so I can decolonize, anti-homophobic, all of these things. It's all related. Yes. But it is not comfortable. So thank you, Art, for making the process a little digestible for me and for others so that I can get these messages through and across for myself and for community.
And so much of that, I mean, I look at, I feel like we're in a real important time right now. Like we can say that at any point and then just kind of like, brush it off. But I really think we're in a place right now that we're really opening up to the self. If like, I don't know what else, and so much of what we're talking about is revolved around. I want you to take this word as broadly as you can. Sober or sobriety, right? Like this idea of like thinking in a sober state. This idea of being and that doesn't mean like not drinking or not being intoxicated at times, but it just means like approaching life from a space of being emotionally sober, from being like calm, so that we don't have to continue to beat ourselves up and put ourselves on the back burner or check out from these uncomfortable spaces. How do you, because I know I do it, like I put myself in uncomfortable positions all the time just to fucking make it work, because like if I'm always comfortable, then I'm never questioning. And being uncomfortable makes me question my shit, because I do the work. I'm not questioning why are you making me uncomfortable? I said, why am I uncomfortable? And so how does that resonate with you?
I just flash back to my life and how I was raised and who I am, but also the family I have now and my community. And it's just incredibly mixed. And that's the biggest gift and challenge in this navigating sobriety in the broad sense of the term,
right.
Emotionally and mentally, and just being present in my life. It means a constant adjusting and looking at things from different angles, because no one around me is like me. And I mean, it's easy to say that if you're all the same-ish, or like racially and ethnically similar with the same socioeconomic lifestyle or whatever. But I mean, literally everyone around me is different. Right. and breaking these gender binary roles and all of this beautiful trailblazing happening within the trans and queer community, specifically Black trans women, Black femmes, holding the space for years and just talking about these things. And all of a sudden, some of these buzzwords are getting traction in other communities, and those other communities are taking credit for that. And it's interesting, to say the least, to see. So
that's where
happening.
We're moving. Yeah, like we're moving into appropriation next.
And yeah, Black, specifically Black American, African American, or of African descent in the Americas is probably, next to indigenous cultures, is the most co-opted, appropriated culture on the planet. Like on the planet. And that's exhausting. And so just, I mean, I'm an educator. I am an indigenous educator. And that is my role. I'm going to keep doing that. Yeah. And with art, with educating, I teach decolonizing art history online now. Thank you, COVID. But I mean, there's ways to get the message across and talk about these things. Because I didn't learn about appropriation until, let's be real, I think 10 years ago. Yeah, like that term was new to me. All the binary terms or non-binary, that's relatively new. I just didn't know about it. I wasn't exposed to it until later. Like I was like late 20s, early 30s. Yeah. So education is really important. And I don't just mean formal, but just becoming aware of things and learning about things. Like if you don't know something, learn more about it. It doesn't mean run away. Right. Or just because I don't agree. Like I didn't understand. I just didn't understand about trans folks, trans identity, non-binary until I was taught, and it was not comfortable. And I am a queer indigenous woman. I am a two-spirit woman. But even that, like all of these languages, they come and go too. Like the term POC doesn't apply anywhere outside of the United States, really. That was coined by another fierce Black professor woman. Her name escapes me, but that term is relatively new. And it doesn't really make sense outside of the context of the US. And so just being aware of these dynamics too. And where's the biggest of African descent, African diaspora outside of the US? It's in South America, actually, Central and South America. And people in the United States don't talk about that very much.
Right.
Unless you actively go and seek it out. So where's the funding going to go in our education? Who's actively seeking out what?
Right.
Like, I'm really tired of learning about Eurocentric art and culture.
How many?
I think we all know that now. Can we move on?
Right.
It's time for a new curriculum. Can we learn
I'm really-
about everybody else?
I'm really sick of all the books and things where it's just like how to draw a nose, and it is straight up European. Like, who are you going to teach that to? Like,
That is
come
not
on.
everybody's nose. Exactly.
That's right. You know, this brings to mind for me the fear of being oneself, the fear that colonization puts on people. This relates really directly, I think, to this space of addiction where it's just like, well, I don't fit in. I'm going to use I fit in now. Now, if I quit, and I know this was my story, if I quit, I'm not going to be me. And the thing is that me that was using wasn't me at all. It was the
Right.
identity that I was trying to hold on to.
Sure. I mean, that's a very, well, I don't know. That's interesting in the context of sobriety or of addiction. But I always think of colonialism and its poisons, specifically to African people who were trafficked and sold into slavery.
Now, that's some
indigenous
generational
peoples.
trauma right there. Like
But like
that
both.
is generational
It's like
trauma.
the African
That
diaspora, yes,
Right.
and the indigenous people who were displaced, but not only displaced, because people think we don't exist anymore, like we're always spoken of in the past tense.
oh god, yeah,
But that's just colonialism, and then the language that is used to describe holocausts and genocide are really disturbingly inaccurate in its depiction of what actually happened. And so that's why I hear a lot of ignorant pushback, like that was so long ago, or you guys don't even exist anymore, or yeah, slavery was so long ago and I never owned slaves, so this doesn't apply to me. They're just like wanting to run away from looking at oneself. And when I say one, white people and
Yeah,
people
white
with
people.
white privilege
Yeah.
or white
Yeah,
passing.
yeah.
I don't like the word. I'll get into white passing later. But I mean, people don't want to look at that because it fucking sucks. And it feels like they can't do anything about it. But the truth is, you can. If you face that shit
Right.
and own it and just, yes, let me hold this space with you without taking up space. Let's grieve this together because I'm upset too. This is horrible. Like, wouldn't that be a more healthy response?
I mean, step one, admit
Right.
you have a problem.
Just getting out of denial.
Right.
And
just,
I mean-
just find that space.
But just these terms to protect the ego or the house of cards of white fragility is interesting to me because it's just lies. It is a house of cards. Like, that's why I don't buy the term white passing, because you never hear the term black passing, Asian passing, native passing. No, it's only in the context of being a part of this group that is said to be superior. So I personally don't really like to say that about myself. I understand when people use the term, but it's just it becomes semantics to me. It's just kind of ignoring what's really happening. Look, okay, myself as an example. I'm not going to be white. I'm white. Put me next to my husband who is black. I am white. So I know the difference between race and ethnicity. But a lot of people use the ethnicity as a misnomer. I see this a lot in the Latinx community. I'm calling out my own people. But it's Native community as well. But just Latinx people who look like me or who are lighter or whiter don't say that necessarily. They cling more to their nationality or their ethnicity. Oh, soy Hispana, soy Latina, soy Latinx, I'm Mexican, I'm Chilean. But that doesn't really address the heart of the matter. And maybe I'm just a purist or a realist or something, but to me, it's just not true. It's just not true. I know race is a social construct, but that's the pedagogy we're in. That's what we're learning. That's what everybody uses to interface. So if I don't use that, people are going to look at me weird, or they're not going to understand. Or they're going to lose patience talking to me because I demand the use of other language to describe what we're discussing, because I'm not going to look at it with the frame of this this straight Eurocentric male perspective. That's just not who I am.
Right.
But yes, I benefit from all this shit. Yes, based on my appearance. Yeah, I do. I own it. I am privileged. I don't like it, and I'm going to use my privilege for good. But yes, I am white and I am native. No one can see the native. But underneath, yes, I'm Mapuche and Ashkenazi. What?
Yeah.
Like, I know the difference. I'm not running away from being called white like I once was. I really didn't want to be associated with them people. But the truth is, I am them people.
Yeah, I don't either. So I'm sweating.
But I can't run.
I'm all like, white folks be all fucked up.
Because this is not black.
Like, no.
This is not black.
No, I know it.
So
I talk.
I
have a workshop, and I talk a lot about this idea of I work a lot with trans people. I was producing a movie called Transfiguration about trans people in the that were what's the word? They were in religious communities. They were leaders in religious communities. I forget the word for what that is.
Are you talking about indigenous community?
No.
African?
Just trans community. People that were in not missionaries. I think it starts with an M. Word is escaping me. Either way, people that were in religious communities that were trans. I was interviewing them as part of this, and I was doing all the pre-production. The film never came out, but still on a back burner somewhere for me. But one of the things that I admire so much, and I love so much about the trans experience is that they can't hide, right? Like hiding from who we are is something that we do so much, right? Like if I have an alcohol problem, I can hide that from 90% of my life, and then I can just go home and drink and be alone and do all of this stuff. If I'm a cutter, if I have an eating disorder, if I have shame with me because of my shopping addiction or because of my food addiction or because of anything that has to do with me, right? And even yourself, like you can hide your Mapuche blood. You can hide your Jewish blood. Right? So now we don't want to do that. We like the fact that we can hide lets us off the hook. And I feel like trans people understand like really facing themselves more than any of us, because they're especially if they go through transition, they have to, and if they don't, they have to face this every day, right? Like, because they want to be, and they have to demand that of other people. But so much this hiding from ourselves, and when we talk about this idea of passing, when we talk about this idea of being white and utilizing our privilege and other things like that, like how does and you're someone who I'm assuming doesn't hide from, doesn't try and keep this from anybody. You're just like, no, this is who I am, and I'm present in it. Of course, we all came from a place where we were hiding, and so how, like, even like not knowing you were Mapuche, it was even being hidden from you.
Yeah.
So can you speak to that at all? Like, again, I don't know if there are questions in here or more like, hey, I want to know something about this from you.
Well, it's beautiful that you bring up trans folks, because in indigenous communities, specifically Mapuche, to be trans and or queer is well, you're sacred already, but those are specific kind of medicine that is like medicine people, because they can be between the worlds, because they understand that that's a very unique sacred thing. And that is not, sadly, that is not held as such in culture today, in the mainstream. They're being treated the worst. So that's very sad to me, because that is colonialism again. Really just doing what it does best, which is homogenizing everything. And people forget, because if you take people's language away, and then they can't communicate with their elders, things don't get passed down, things get lost. And I don't know who came up with that plan, but I mean, as destructive as it was a good plan. It has worked. But there's good news, which is all that ancestral wisdom is still there too. Yes, we got to heal a lot of the trauma, but there is wisdom there. And the closer I have come to facing my own shadows and embracing my indigenous heritage, the stronger that connection is. And then it's like not as challenging for me to connect and get what I need and restore with my culture. It used to be like, because I had more of an insecurity around it, because I didn't have that strong connection. So it was more like really just wanting to be validated. But now it's like, no, I know that now. And being in the position I am as an educator, and a lot of my students come to me, especially of the Latinx community, and we talk about these things. There's a lot of damage that happened before it reached the United States in terms of the genocide and the colonialism. It just moved up the Americas. So I guess that was kind of a good thing in terms of I think of Lakota Nation, They were able to preserve, a lot of the nations here were able to preserve their way of life and their culture and their language and all of these things, because it didn't hit them right away. It was coming gradually. Yes, it was terrible. All of it. Like slavery throughout the Americas. Terrible. But I'm just talking about the motion in which it traveled.
Right.
Maybe there was a little bit of a notice, a little bit more of a notice. Yeah. And that was a good thing. And then they got to protect a lot of important things. But yeah, what my brother refers to as cultural genocide. That's what colonialism does. Mm-hmm. And the damage it leaves behind. But knowing who I am, I had to fight for her so hard. Now it's very strong. And I can have something to give to my children that isn't just trauma or a story of broken pieces. No, some of those pieces are together now. So, and they have their own journey as Black children, as Black people. And I don't know, I talk about this a lot. We don't know their gender pronouns yet. We're still figuring that out. Right now, my daughter is she, her, and really likes pink, but that could change. Because I liked pink once upon a time, and then I felt queer. I'm queer. At 13, I was trying to come out. And nobody listened. I had to keep knocking until. But every journey's so unique. But I think the moral of the story, or my takeaway, is just do not stop. Baby steps still get you to where you're trying to go. And I'm still in it. Like I said, colonialism's still here. Yeah. I gotta navigate.
That's right. We're not done. And that's not the point. The point isn't to be done. And it's to continue to be ourselves, so that we to really be who we are.
It's a journey.
Yes, that's right, for all of us. And the work that we do helps everybody else, and that's the thing that makes it so worthwhile, and just it keeps us going.
I really hope so. I mean, a lot of educators say this, that you don't always see the fruits of your labor. And that's really true. I don't know what impact I've made. I really can't always tell, unless a student specifically comes back and says whatever impacted them. But that doesn't mean I stop.
Right.
Yeah.
You have like for me, I just have to just keep having faith that I'm doing the good work. I'm doing the good, and that's it. Like I follow my heart because my heart isn't going to take me down a bad path. So I just keep following it and keep speaking from
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm the only Indigenous educator on staff at my school.
Mm,
So I'm sure I'm making some impact somewhere, um, framing things in a decolonial lens. At
right.
least I try. Yeah, that's a lot of work, a lot of emotional labor that I don't
Yeah.
get paid for.
That's right.
But it's okay. I get payment in other ways. Like it's a very rewarding job. Um, yeah, it's just recognizing what system I'm navigating in, because they're all institutions of oppression
Right.
through colonialism. So
Yeah.
it's like I'm choosing this one. So this is where I'm going to work at deconstructing and decolonizing with my students and learning together. And I'm just going to be in that lane. And the prison industrial complex, health, and everyone, they're just pick which one. I can't be in all of them.
Right.
But as an artist, I feel like education is the best, conduit for this work. And I'm just going to keep swimming in my lane.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned the prison industrial complex because that's a big topic of mine as well. That I'm going to be I'm scheduling an interview right now with a man that got sober in prison and wants to talk about how there is no help there. You're their paycheck. Like they don't want you out. So
yeah.
Mujer Muralista. Thank you so much for all of this. Like, I am really excited to get in and edit some of this stuff and figure out like what we just did, because we talked about a lot of stuff and bringing it all together is going to be a lot of fun for me.
Well, I really appreciate the time to share space with you, and I look forward to the next time. Who knows?
Yeah, we'll be in touch.
Okay, wonderful. This was a lot of fun.
Good. One point I want to drive home of the many that came up in this interview is that no one person's journey is right, and nobody's journey invalidates anyone else's. Inez addressed this directly, calling it colonialism, and I couldn't agree more. Your journey to recovering yourself is going to be very unique. I mean, last week's episode with Barbie the Welder addressed her having re-engaged alcohol in her life. This isn't wrong. She made the choice and is still on a recovery journey. Just one in which consistent sober time is not a factor. We're all born into this world that wants us to fit a mold, and even when we say that we should express ourselves, there's still a mold in which the way we can do that is accepted. Colonization is a great topic to think about when it comes to recovering yourself. It's always amazed me that so many people all want the same thing, right? Like money, cars, house, wife, children, whatever, These things have very little to do with who you are, but are a big part of the colonists' machine that we are all tied to. I encourage you to think about how colonization may have led you to thinking you weren't enough. Maybe even has you working towards goals you don't even want, and how even today, as you continue your recovery path, it might be dictating how you move forward. When people are not allowed to be their true selves, this causes tension in the world. And like in nature, when you eliminate one aspect, one creature or element, you affect others in ways you may never know. Once there is suppression of something, especially if that thing is unique, you may never know how to replace that which it provides. Monocultures cannot survive, and considering all we know today, they are super short-sighted. You can find links to all that Mujer Muralista is doing in the description of this episode. Please rate and review this podcast or leave comments so that I can improve the content for you, my audience. Support this show at anchor.fm or support me and my work at Patreon to get access to unedited content, as well as writings and one-on-one access to support group portrait sessions with me. I host workshops regularly and take a limited number of one-on-one clients every month, so contact me when you're ready to work together. Thank you for listening to the Recover Yourself podcast. Until next time, keep recovering yourself.